Hi there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. In this video, I'm putting together my Project Life spread for the week of August 4th through August 10th, 2025, and I'm working with the Colors Storyteller Kit from Ali Edwards. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so this week I planned out my spread using the Storyteller Kit with the colors theme. So that is the third Storyteller Kit from Ali Edwards. And I sketched this out, and I can't share that with you guys here because that is in that classroom. But if you are a subscriber, you can go over to the classroom content and look in my lesson where I planned out all of my projects for that kit, including this one. And I think this is actually the first one I'm putting together. I'm not sure, but this is what I put for this, aside for this. And I think that this is going to come together super quick and easily based on just having a plan in advance and a lot of photos. So I'm gonna start by trimming this down. And I think I'm gonna be able to do most of this video not in voiceover just because I think it's gonna come together so quickly. But essentially I put this pattern paper in here because I'm gonna use this to create 3 filler cards. And a lot of times when I do these sketches in advance, because I haven't yet lived the week, I don't really know what my stories are going to be. So I come up with ideas, but I'm not necessarily going to stick with them exactly. But this is the time where I came up with these ideas and I didn't know what was going to happen, and it ended up working out really perfectly for the stories that I wanted to tell. So I will share a little bit about that as I get to laying this out. Okay, so these are going to be 3 filler cards. So I think that is how I have them. And then I pulled over, this one is going to be for my title card. I'm going to need to get some white cardstock and put that together. That's fine. And then I have the story cards and these framed cards. So my plan is to pair these together, and these are going to be used to do my journaling, and then these are going to be the homes for photos. So what I was originally thinking was that I would print photos just like that and have a little bit of the 2 colored borders showing. So when I originally planned this, I thought, okay, I need 5 stories, I need a bunch of photos that go in these, and I have a few extra photos. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But what ended up happening was I hit 10,000 followers on Instagram. So if you follow me on Instagram, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I was kind of shocked that I hit 10,000. It kind of snuck up on me, and it's just very exciting. So I'm super thankful that I found the YouTube Instagram community and that I'm a part of it. So to celebrate that, my boyfriend surprised me with a big 10K balloon. And so of course I had to take some pictures, and I had a bunch of those, and I thought, well, this is perfect to create a photo series. So that's what I'm going to do with those. And then I had space for 3 additional photos. So I just printed some other photos from the week, and I'm just going to lay these out. I didn't have any other big stories this week. Let's see, we made lemonade, made smoothie bowls, and then this was my friend Jen Boom Creates was on the Paper People podcast with Amy Y'all, so I watched that, and I'll link that in the description box below. If you are new to that podcast, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's about journaling and pens and all those fun things, and it's a video podcast, so it's here on YouTube. And then let's see, we have my story cards, so I'm just gonna kind of lay these out like that. And then these guys, so I have these little embellishments, and my plan was to make these into filler cards, and then I'm going to pair these with these. So let me slide this out of the way and kind of take a look at what are all the colors I have. And then I have one of these is on a different background. This one is super colorful. So I think I'm gonna put that on this one so it doesn't clash. There There we go. And then I'm gonna do the rest. I'm gonna put on music while I glue these down, and then continue on. There we go. So these are not perfect, but let me just see. So I think these, I printed them to 2.5 by 3.5. So it's not perfect with the margins, but then I just kind of eyeballed how it would fit in there. And I think that that worked out pretty well. So then I got to go ahead and kind of mix these up across my spread. Okay, there we go. So now what I need to do is adhere these down, which that'll be quick. And then I need to put together my title card, which I think is just gonna be cropping down some white cardstock and stamping the dates on. And then I need to do my journaling. And then I need to think about if I want to pull anything from my stash to add on top of these other photos that don't have another treatment. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to want to, but I'll figure that out after I do the rest, or at least start on the journaling. As far as the journaling goes, because I have these 5 specific story cards, I did write out in advance the 5 stories I wanted to tell this week. And so I have that as reference, and I'm going to use my take a note as reference for what happened during the week, because that is kind of my go-to. So I have here kind of notes from the week of what happened, so I can use that as reference while doing all of my journaling. And so I'm gonna go ahead and put this to the side, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and put you guys on voiceover as to get this one finished up. So as expected, this one comes together really quickly because it's very formulaic. So most of my Project Life spreads, I would say, have some level of formula to them, but this is something that I kind of want to talk about with this spread, because if you're working on Project Life, this might be something that you don't think about in this critical way, but it is helpful in designing your spreads. So a spread like this is very formulaic because you can see all of these repeated elements. I essentially have 4 different types of cards. I have the story cards. I have photos by themselves that I am going to give a similar treatment to. I have photos in the frames, and then I have the grid filler cards. That is a super streamlined formula. When you use a formula like this, the entire spread is very cohesive, and it comes together really easily because you don't have to have a lot of different choices. So if you're struggling with Project Life or you're falling behind in Project Life, I highly recommend coming up with a formula. You don't have to work with a kit to do something this formulaic, though. You can use stash supplies and still be super formulaic with your spread design. The flip side of that would be completely no formula, which means every single pocket stands alone. It's like its own layout, and you just kind of bring them all together. When you do something like that, you're going to have a lot more going on in your spread because there won't be those patterns across the spread, which might make it more interesting to you. It's really a style preference. But when you don't do a formula, it's going to take a lot longer, because you have to think about each different pocket and how you want to address it, but it's also going to be more customized. So you're not going to be following this formula. So each card in each pocket, you can make it very personalized, and it's not going to look like anyone else's project. So those are things to keep in mind when deciding how you want to approach your spreads. Of course, you can do a range. You can do things that are somewhere in the middle that have some formula and have some differences across the cards, but just something to keep in mind if you are working on this project, especially if you are struggling with trying to find a rhythm in working with the project and how you approach it. When I first started this project in 2013, I did not use formulas at all. I did that a very extreme approach where every single pocket was like its own project, its own project life, or its own like scrapbook layout. And it took a lot of time, but I really love looking back on those spreads. So I do like having a mix. Back to what I'm doing. So you can see I decided to do some stamping on these journaling cards to give kind of like a title to each of them. 4 of them have their own specific story. And then the 5th one is going to be my bullet point list. If you are new here, something I like to do in my Project Life spreads is include a bullet point list of those little micro stories from the week that don't need their own journaling card and most likely don't have a photo or anything else, but I just want to make reference to them because that is kind of the core of Project Life, documenting those little tiny details from the week. So the stories that I decided to tell, I have 4 big stories. One of them is the 10K story, which I talked about in the intro, and I have all those photos for. The other stories don't really have photos, and 2 of them are really kind of not great stories, but I still wanted to document them because they were a part of my week and a part of my story. So the home stuff, we had some home problems. I'm a homeowner, and so I love owning my own home, but sometimes it's a negative. And I had some sewage backup, and I had to fix it myself. And I also had a beehive, and I had to fix that myself. So it was a bit of a struggle, but I did it, and I'm happy about that. So I wanted to document that. The PSLF drama, if you don't know, that's the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. It's a federal program for government workers who have student debt, federal student debt, and I am a part of the program. If you don't know, I am an attorney, but I work for the government, so I make significantly less than most attorneys for the work that I do, but I do that as a trade-off because I am entitled to this Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program as kind of a portion of my compensation. And I'm at the point where I should be getting forgiveness, but I'm working through the process because with all of the changes in the federal government, there is a lot of red tape. And so it has been a struggle, but I'm working through it. The final story I wanted to tell this week was about just kind of having a slower pace this summer. Last summer at this time, I was in Europe, and it was a very busy, very big trip. And this summer, I've really been relaxing and having a slower pace. I am going to be traveling this fall instead, and I'm enjoying having this slower pace right now. Usually in the summer, I'm outside a lot, I'm busy a lot, but this summer the weather hasn't been great. So it's just been nice to kind of relax in the house, spend some time on some crafts, not have as much of a structure to my day, which is not very typical for me because I am a very type A structured planner person. So I just wanted to document that. I did bring in some embellishments earlier where you saw that I was bringing them in for those 3 photos. I pulled some chipboard hearts from my stash and paired them with some word phrase strips that are black. I decided to use black word phrase strips to kind of mirror the black in the checkerboard cards and not bring in any more colors because this layout is super colorful. My photos are colorful. The cards are colorful. All of the products that I brought in were colorful from the Colors Kit, which is understandable from that title. So I didn't want to bring in any more color, and I like how it came together. And I just need to finish up my journaling at this point. You can see that I went back and forth between journaling and working on the other cards, and that's simply because my hand gets tired if I journal all of those cards at once. This spread has a lot of journaling on it. I don't usually journal quite this much, but I had some of these longer stories, and I'm happy that it worked out with this plan for this spread. If you did miss that, if you are a Storyteller subscriber, I do have a lesson in that classroom where I share my plan for using all of the products, including planning out this spread. So you might want to go check that out to see kind of my initial plan for this that I made prior to even living this week. So kind of how I approach that. Sometimes people ask, how do you plan out a spread before knowing what the stories are going to be? So that is helpful information on how I do that if you are interested. For my journaling, I am using a fountain pen. This is my Sailor Pro Gear, and I have Diatramentis Archive ink in it. If you are not really a fountain pen person, I wouldn't recommend
starting with this pen because it is an expensive pen. It was a gift, but this ink is definitely one that I recommend picking up because most fountain pen inks are not waterproof, so you can't highlight over them, you can't highlight under them. If the page gets wet at all, they bleed. They're very sensitive. This ink is different. It is definitely a lot more like the kind of ink you would see in a gel pen, in that you can highlight it, it doesn't smear as much, but it does still have some of those fun qualities of fountain pen ink in that it flows a little unevenly, so you get that really pretty fountain pen style. That is going to wrap up this spread. I'm just going to go ahead and slip everything into the pockets and make sure I like the final layout. You saw me switch some of the cards around. I was just trying to balance the colors and the borders, the white with the darker cards, and have it just appear balanced across the spread. Here's a look at how that completed spread came out. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye.